Hakavya ben Mahalel Omer. Hakavya, the son of Mahalalel, says, Histakel b'shloisha devarim, one should focus and meditate and observe and ponder upon three things. Vein ata ba l'dei avera, and you will not come to the hands of sin. Da ma'ayim basa, know from where you came. Ula'an ata hailech, and to where you are going. V'lifnei mi'ata asid litein din v'cheshbin, and before whom you are going to give a judgment and a reckoning. And he goes on to explain, ma'ayin basa, where do you come from? Bitipa serucha, from a putrid drop. Ula'an ata hailech, and where are you going? L'makoim afar rima v'seileya, you're going to a place of dust, maggots, and worms. Before whom are you going to give a judgment and a reckoning? Before the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be his name. To understand this Mishnah, Pshat, the Remes, the Rush, Soit, Chassidus, to understand it on 5 levels. On the level of Pshat, what is the Kavi ben Mahalel saying? He's saying that if a person will know that he comes, number one, mitipus rucha, that he comes from a putrid drop, then he will not be arrogant, he'll be humble. Furthermore, if he knows where he's going to go, which is a place of maggots and worms and dust, he will not have any temptations for physical desires or money, because he knows he can't take it with him. And finally, the third thing, before whom you are going to give a reckoning before God, and that will make you into a yirei chet, one will have fear and awe of sin. Now this already connects us with the sayer of this Mishnah. Who is the sayer of this Mishnah? Kavya ben Mahalel. What does a Kavya ben Mahalalel represent? So we find in the Tractate of Idias, it says over there in Mishnah in chapter number 5, it says over there that Rabbi Yehuda says that if you take 1/3 of the Jewish people and you would put that 1/3 of the Jewish people into the Holy Temple on the day before Passover, when they bring the Paschal Lamb, you will not find anyone as great as Akavya ben Mahalalel. Number one, not as great as him in Chachma and wisdom. Number two, no one is as great as him in Anava, in humility. And number three, no one is as great as him when it comes to Yirei Chet, to have awe of sin. And these 3 things are the 3 things that he says. You should know that if you're going to know Ma'ayin Basir, then you will not be arrogant. That represents humility. Akavi ben Mahalala was very humble. Number 2 is, where you're going to a place of maggots, and therefore you're not going to waste your time on physical temptations. That comes about from Chachma, intellect, using your brain. You don't have to be a holy person. If you're simply a logical person, you know to invest in things that are long-term, not short-term. And thirdly, the fact that you know before whom you stand, before the King of all kings, therefore you will have fear of sin. This was exactly who Akavya was. So this is the Pshat. Now, how do we understand the Remez and the Drush and the Soid and the Chassidus? So to begin by asking a few questions. Number one is, why does the Kavya ben Mahalalel have to say 3 separate sentences? Number one, you should focus on 3 things. Then he goes on to say what the 3 things are. And then he goes on to expound what the 3 things he just said are. He should simply say, you know what? If a person knows that he came from a putrid drop and he's going to a place of maggots and worms, and that he's going to stand before God, he won't come to sin. Why must he say a number, 3 things, and then go to say what the 3 things are, and then to expound on what these 3 things are? We know that the rabbis were very concise, especially the rabbis of the Mishnah. Over the Gemara elaborates on the Mishnah, but the Mishnah is much more concise than the Gemara. So here we have a Mishnah here in Pirkei Avot in chapter 3, and yet Akavi ben Mahalalel goes to expound on all these details. So first and foremost, what is the remez here? What is the hint? The hint is for the world to come, to the coming of Mashiach. In other words, how does one read the Mishnah and say to himself, how does this Mishnah teach me to bring Mashiach now? And the answer is, Istakel b'shloisha dvarim. One should look and focus on 3, the number 3. The number 3 represents the 3rd Holy Temple. It's not only the 3rd Holy Temple, but it's 3 things. Because the 3rd Holy Temple, the 3rd Beis HaMikdash, will really be a conglomerate of the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd together. The 1st was given by God, and we were not kelim, we were not vessels to receive it. The 2nd temple was built by us, by the Jewish people, but yet God wasn't really there. We were missing the Aron, the Ark. We did not see revealed miracles. And the 3rd Holy Temple that will be built through Mashiach himself, this temple will be a combination of the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd together. And therefore, how do we do this? By focusing on 3 things. Torah, Avoda, Ugemilas Chasadim. By the fact that each one of us will increase in the study of Torah. Especially the teachings dealing with the world to come and paradise and the days of Mashiach, which will create an appetite and a yearning and a pining for Mashiach. And also to increase in our prayers and asking God for Mashiach. And furthermore, by the fact that we increase in good deeds and in charity in particular, because it says that the Jewish people will be redeemed through charity. Through these 3 things, we will truly bring about the redemption. That is remez, the hint. What is drush? Homiletics. So here we look into the Mishnah, we find a terminology which seems to be a bit difficult to comprehend. It says that you should remember and know that the time will come in the future that you have to give a din and a cheshbon. A din means a judgment. A cheshbon means a reckoning. It seems to be in the reverse order. When you go to court, first the judge says, tell me what's going on over here. I want a reckoning of the case. And after you give him a reckoning, he will give you a din, he will give you the verdict. So the Mishnah should have said that you should know before whom you give a reckoning and a verdict, not a verdict and a reckoning. So here the Rebbe explains, based on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, a very interesting thing. And that is when a soul comes to heaven and stands before the heavenly tribunal, the angels there have no power over the soul of a Jew. The neshama, the soul of a Jew, is higher and greater than all the angels. So how then does the angel impose judgment upon the soul, upon the neshama, upon that person? The answer is, you are the one that is your judge. The angel shows you a movie, a video of a person's life, what a person did. However, the person is someone else. And then the angel turns to you and says, so tell me, is that person a tzaddik? Is he righteous? Is he a rasha? Is he a wicked person? Is he a beinoni? Is he in the middle? How would you classify that person? Oh, that guy, he's a rasha. He's a wicked guy. Really? Aha. Well, let me replay that video for you. That's you. Really? What do you mean that's me? Yeah, you did all those things. What are you talking about? I never did anything like that. Really? I will give you a reckoning. So first, you are the one that gives the din. You give your own judgment, and then the angels show you the reckoning, how you are that person that you just classified, that you just gave this verdict to. So that is the meaning of din v'cheshbon. So therefore, the next time we classify a person or judge a person, and think about yourself. Perhaps you are really giving a verdict on yourself. So that is the drush, the homiletics. What is the soid? What is the esoteric level according to Kabbalah here? The name Akavya, it says in Kabbalah, the word Akavya comes from Akev, which is the heel. Akavya comes from the heel of Adam. And furthermore, Ben Mahalalel. He is the son of Mahalalel. Mahalalel was a person that the Torah speaks about already in the book of Genesis in chapter 5. But Akavya also was a reincarnation to refine and fix this individual Mahalalel. Therefore he is called Akavya ben Mahalalel. Now what does Mahalalel represent? So it says over there in the Medrash Haggadah, it says in the Medrash Haggadah that Mahalalel was called this because of the fact that he returned with tshuva, and he was the one that praised Almighty God in prayer and exalted Almighty God. So the word Mahalalel comes from the word Halel. He was a person who praised God, which gives us now additional information and insight to a classical teaching of Chassidus. And that is the Pirkei Rebbe writes in his Sichos that there was a person by the name of Rab Baruch Mordechai of Babroisk. He was a big rabbi in Babroisk. He was known to be a Goin. He was known to be a genius in the study of Torah. As a young lad, a young man already, he was the Reish Mesivta. He was the head of the Mesivta in Vilna in the time of the Vilna Goin. And he was a big chassid. And he translated this Mishnah, Akavya ben Mahalalel Omer, that the piyata, the heel of a davener, a prayer, was loib der Eibishter sagt, that the heel of an individual that prays to God and praises God says the following. In other words, the teaching of Soid, of esoteric and Hasidic, based on this esoteric teaching, is telling us that when is the time that a person should focus on these three things? When is a good time for a person to meditate on these three things? During the time of prayer. If a person prays properly, that even his heel is also involved in the prayer, not only his lips. He's not only giving lip service, but kol atzmoisei tormaina. All of my limbs, all of my bones are praying before God, even my heel. Then you have the ability to transform your ego. You have the ability to overcome all your temptations. And you are an individual that has the ability to truly become a yirei chet, to truly fear sin, and therefore focus your time on positive things. So this is the approach of Soid, the approach of Kabbalah. How do we understand this based on Chassidus? So here the Rebbe says that the fact that the Mishnah divides the teachings of Akavya ben Mahalalel into three separate statements implies that really we are talking about three separate people. Three different types of people. The first person is a tzaddik, the second person is a beinoni, and the third person is a rasha. Who is a tzaddik? Tzaddik, the Rebbe explains in Tanya, tzaddik, a righteous person, is not only a nice guy, a nice person. That's not a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone that not only does the tzaddik have no sin, he never sins, he's truly a yirei chet, he fears sin, But the tzaddik has no yetzer hara, the tzaddik has no evil inclination. He has no desire to sin. That's a tzaddik. So what then does the tzaddik have? He has taivis, he has temptations for things that are permissible. In other words, if the meat is kosher, he might want to eat the meat. If the ice cream is kosher, he wants to eat the ice cream. But he has no temptations to violate the Shabbos. He has no temptations to steal money. A clear sin or violation in the Torah is something that the tzaddik is totally foreign to. And therefore comes along the Mishnah and says, for a tzaddik, a person who's on such a high level, you should know, histakel b'shloisha devarim. All that tzaddik has to do is meditate on three things. He has to meditate on the study of Torah. He has to meditate on prayer. He has to meditate on mitzvahs, good deeds. He has to put his time and effort into these three things. If he does, he will have no time to sin. In other words, ve'ein atava lidei avera. Not only will he not sin, which he has no temptation to begin with, but he will not come lidei avera, to the hands of sin. What is the terminology here, the hand of sin? For example, if you have a cup, a mug, you have a handle on the mug, you have a big pot, you have handles on the pot. The handle is not the pot. The handle is not the mug, but it's a handle to the mug. The hands of sin implies it's not sin, but yet it's not a mitzvah. It's like a temptation for something which is permissible, but yet it's not totally for the sake of God. And therefore the tzaddik, if he will focus on these three things and put his thought, speech, and action into the study of Torah, charity, and prayer, he will not only not sin, but not even come to the hands of sin, and therefore not even have desires for things that are permissible, but perhaps not for the sake of God. That's the first thing. The second clause in the Mishnah is, you should know from where you come, know where you're going, and before whom you are going to have to give a judgment and a reckoning. Who is this? This is the Beinoni. This is the average person. What does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya about a Beinoni, the average person? The Beinoni is someone who has a desire to sin. He has temptation. However, he does not sin. He doesn't even have one sin, because he overcomes this temptation by pushing out the temptation out of his mind. So what do we tell the Beinoni? We tell the Beinoni words of inspiration. What are the words of inspiration? You should know, da ma'ayin basa, know from where you come. What does that mean? We tell him you should know that you have a neshama which is part of God. And this neshama comes from the level of ayin. It comes from the level of the supernal nothingness, or as some people call it, the absolute nothingness. In other words, it comes from God. It comes from a very high place. And therefore you have tremendous potential. And therefore your soul came down to the world to make the world a better place, a holier place, a godly place. And therefore we are reminding and encouraging and energizing the Beinoni to be proactive and to use that as potential for good. Furthermore, we tell him, Ula'an atahilich, and you should know where you're going. What is that? The word on represents the revelation that takes place after the resurrection of the dead. We know that after Mashiach comes, and there will be the resurrection of the dead, not only will there be the revelation of God as Mamali Kol Almin, the God that fills all of the worlds according to their needs, a limited light, but rather there'll be the revelation of the Orein Sof, the infinite light, and even more so, there'll be the revelation of Atzmus, the essence of God himself. And furthermore, as we find in Chassidus that it says the soul in paradise, when it goes from one level of paradise to another level of paradise, it first has to divest itself from the previous level. And therefore it has to go into a river of fire, a mikvah of fire, to forget about the previous pleasures. And then it goes into a shaft, an amud, which allows it to have a void, to receive now new pleasure for the next world. So you have great sages and great scholars and great prophets like Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Moses, that for 3,000 years, 3 times a day went higher and higher. And every year on the yahrzeit, on their passing, they have a quantum leap. So they went already over higher and higher, over 3,000 worlds. Even they want to come down to this world when Mashiach comes. Why? Because when Mashiach comes, you don't have to forget about the previous pleasures of the previous world. We'll continue to go higher and higher. And yet, at the same time, you'll be able to bring the previous pleasure of the previous world together with the new pleasure of the new world. So that is on. And therefore we tell the Beinoni, by doing more mitzvahs, and getting more tzedakah, and studying more Torah, and putting on tefillin on yourself and other Jews, this is the way you're going to acquire higher and higher levels when Mashiach will come. And then we tell him a third thing. Before whom are you going to be in the future? Mi ata asid litindin v'cheshbon. Who is me? In Hebrew, mi represents the level of Atik. Atik represents the level of God's keser, God's crown. And when you tell the Beinoni that he's going to be before the crown of God, representing the essence of God, then the Beinoni is now once again recharged and inspired, and he continues with greater excitement and greater joy to do Torah and mitzvahs. That's the second clause of Akavya ben Malalel. What is the third teaching? The third teaching is to the Rasha. Who is the Rasha? The Rasha is a person who enjoys this physical world. And he lives for enjoyment, for pleasure. And even though he's a good person, he davens 3 times a day, he studies Torah every day, he performs mitzvahs every day, good deeds, but everything is centered around the fact of this world. If I do more mitzvahs, I'll make more money. If I study more Torah, I'll get more paradise. Everything's about me. I'll do these things because God is going to reward me. Because he's not doing it for the proper reasons, it could be that he will come to do an Avot, he'll come to sin. And therefore, Akavya ben Malalel teaches him in a way of chassidus, not in a way of musar, which focuses on the negative and the pain and suffering of going to the purgatory, God forbid. Because if a person only hears the negative and the pain and suffering, after a while you want to give up. There's no joy in your commitment, and there's no excitement in your mitzvahs. The ways of chassidus is to exalt a person, is to inspire a person, to show the person the advantage and the purpose of why we're here, and the strength that we have, and the ability that we have, etc., etc. So comes along Akavya ben Malalel and talks to the Rasha on his level. The Rasha is not someone who understands these deep mystical terminologies of the level of Atik and the level of me and the level of An, etc., etc. So therefore he tells them the same thing that he tells the Beinoni, but in simple terms, in simple words. And he goes on by saying, you should know, Ma'ayin Basa, where do you come from? B'tipas Rucha. And therefore, because you come from a putrid drop, therefore you realize that the body is not important. You can't take the body with you. What's important is things of holiness and spirituality and godliness, and putting on tefillin and studying Torah and keeping Shabbos and keeping kosher. These are the things that are important. And furthermore, where you're going to a place of dust and maggots and worms. Here too, it's not about the fact that you're going to go into the grave. It's the positive aspect. And that is, the word holech means in the present. If a person studies Torah and he does mitzvahs, only because he wants to get physical and monetary benefit out of it, then you realize that the Torah that you're studying and the mitzvahs that you're performing are going to a place of maggots and a place of worms. In other words, as we call it in Chassidus, there is the concept of yinikas chutzonim, that the powers of impurity are now accessing this energy and accessing this light of Torah and mitzvahs because you are not doing it for the right reasons. And then we tell the Rasha, before whom are you going to give a din v'cheshbin, a judgment and a reckoning? And that is before God, who's Melech Malchei Amlochim. You tell the Rasha, you know God is a king, and you know what a king means. And not only is he a king, but he's a king of all kings. So you only met maybe a king, but you never met a king of all kings. And furthermore, God is a king of all kings who is HaKadosh, he's holy. And he's really above and beyond the world, and separated from nature, and separated from the physical, everyday life. But he's also Baruch Hu. He is blessed. In other words, he comes down to the world to be with you. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that even though God has a beautiful castle and a beautiful palace in the Avot, in the highest of worlds, and he has all the angels around him, he has his fan club every day praising God, Kadosh, 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 etc., etc. God relinquishes all of these angels and his fancy palace, and he comes down to this finite, physical, everyday world, and he talks to you face to face, and he says, I need you. I need you to help me make this world a dwelling place. I need you to make this world into a garden. I need you to make this world into a holy spiritual reality. And therefore do a mitzvah, give tzedakah, study Torah. Help me make this world into a better place. And when a person realizes that God himself every single day comes down and talks to us and looks at us and requests of us and asks of us and pleads with us that we, higher than the angels, and we, in exception of every other human being in the entire world, just us, exclusively, face to face, God tells us, I need you. This gives us a tremendous inspiration and a tremendous drive to want to do God's mitzvahs. And that is what Akavya, the Mahalalel, is telling us. Not only is the Mishnah talking to a tzaddik who's a very high spiritual person, or Beini, the average person, but one does not sin. The Mishnah is also talking to the Rasha, an individual like an everyday person that has temptations and is narcissistic and is egocentric, etc., etc. That even that individual has the ability in one moment to transform his life and to become a true light and an inspiration and a teacher and a guide for others. So this is the message that we learn in the third chapter of Pirkei Avos, that we read between Passover and Shavuos, and then again throughout the days of the summer. For this gives us the strength and the hope and the dream to truly become one who is considered to be a kavya, then Mahalalel, to be one that if a third of the Jewish people would be gathered together, you would be the one that would be chosen as the smartest, and to be chosen as the most humble, and to be chosen as the one that is the most God-fearing, to truly make a difference and to make your life more meaningful, and the ultimate blessing of Istakel B'Shloisha, to see the third holy temple with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.